Hello and welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'm Amanda for those who are new here. And one of the things we do on this channel is deep dives into conversations that need to be had within the realm of spirituality, awakening, the collective shift in consciousness. And one of the things that I've been contemplating that I want to speak into today is the more subtle signs of spiritual ego and the sneaky ways that spiritual superiority can show up. I am not talking about spiritual narcissism and the grandiose ways that we have seen it in the collective field. Most of us are really good at recognizing that really grandiose form of spiritual ego. And yeah, it's like the I am God or the I am the reincarnation of kind of thing as well. Like that's so obvious to most at this point. What I'm talking about is those who really do carry a high frequency and who really are quite embodied and on the path of mastery, but it's showing up in a lot more subtle ways. So I've witnessed this in a couple different people recently, and I was really contemplating it and feeling into it because these are conversations that are coming to the fore because we are here to alchemize the shadows, to transmute this separation consciousness that perpetuates hierarchy, that creates the hierarchy in the first place. And it can be super subtle when you're on this path. And perhaps there are degrees of hierarchy that we need in the form of, teaching and mentorship. Some people are still going to perceive that as a hierarchy, but I like to think of it as more of a way shower. You're a step ahead, and so you're explaining how to navigate the path. Some of us did choose to incarnate as way showers. So I want to be clear that this is going to be a very nuanced conversation and that I am including myself in this. We are all still operating in this human vessel, pretty much still navigating the 3D. A lot of us are kind of operating in the 5D consciousness and higher even, but not totally there yet. So, it's this whole idea of I'm so humble in my specialness that we've got to get really, really honest with ourselves about and start calling each other up in ways that are not calling each other out either at the same time. Because yes, I gratefully receive critical feedback that isn't criticism, that isn't projection. I gratefully receive it because it's going to help me to grow and evolve. And yes, there are going to be times where I'm not totally in my highest self when I get some feedback or whatever. But there are also times where if somebody's going to play a game with me, I might choose to play it back a little bit. So that's different. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about anchoring in authentic, embodied leadership because this is no longer about performance and frequency flexing. It's a fun phrase, but this is not what the path forward is about. We need truly authentic embodied leaders. And what does we are one really mean? We need to get really anchored in unity consciousness frequency, what that really actually means as we're actually on this path, navigating it together, especially the way showers, especially those who incarnated here to be the quote unquote leaders of the new earth. So, what does oneness really mean? And we're gonna do some deep dives into this, okay? So there are really subtle signs that I've been kind of picking up on with people that I don't even necessarily follow all of them. Just one video in particular just came onto my feed. She has a very large following. And so I'm going to speak into the very subtle distortions that I picked up on her because she, carries this light, this really beautiful high frequency. And it was really interesting to me because there was some slight, and it was so subtle, I was questioning myself, some slight niggle I had in the way she was sharing her story. So she guided a whole group of people on this beautiful retreat, pilgrimage, however she called it, to Egypt. And Egypt is a very profoundly activating place. There's also a lot of distortion there. So people have to be held in a very, very highly curated container, very, pristine in the way that they curate and integrate and hold the energy. That's so important when you go to a place like Egypt, where there has been a lot of hijacking and distortion. But there was this idea of, my ego didn't know how big this mission was before we went. My soul was guiding me, and it was this really beautiful journey that she was explaining, that she was describing, of how her soul was navigating and guiding, and her human ego really didn't know the fullness of the mission until they got there and they were anchoring it in, and how they created such a massive shift for the grid and for the collective consciousness. And I just want to say that what was coming through to me immediately is, you're not the only ones. You're not the only ones who have done this work. Thousands of people came before you. Thousands of people have been to Egypt specifically, to Giza, to the Nile, to Luxor, to work on the grids. Thousands of people have done grid work. Thousands of people have already worked to clear the fields, to clear the grids, to upgrade the grids. And so this was a very, very poignant realization for me, even for myself, because I do grid work sometimes, and sometimes the mission feels so big. I'm like, oh my gosh. But this was a beautiful reminder and reflection for me that we are not doing this alone. And this is what unity consciousness means, is we have to recognize and acknowledge that even if what we're doing in our particular grid point, in our particular node, feels so massive and so important for the collective, honestly, it probably is. It probably is a massive mission. It probably is important, but we have to remember we're not doing it alone. There are thousands, even millions of light workers around the planet doing grid work, working on the collective field of consciousness, anchoring in light. And so even if there's somebody across the world, they're anchoring in light so you can do your grid work over there, because all the grid is connected, especially the big stargates like Giza. People are working on those heavily all the time. And so it was a really interesting reflection for me, because I saw another video come up immediately after, of a beautiful astrologer, and she was reflecting on an experience that she had where she was at a retreat, and she was like, I feel like it was such a beautiful experience of new earth, and we were all living in 5D and anchoring that in, and I felt like we really helped to shift things for the whole collective. But immediately what she said after was that, and I know we're not the only ones doing this, that there are thousands of others anchoring this in around the planet with us. And so that's the really subtle nuance and distinction that I picked up on and was feeling into. I felt it in the first video, but it was so beautiful to see that mirror reflection immediately of what that distinction looks like, and how that nuance it just requires a 1 degree shift in the way we perceive this work that we're doing. So the ego can make things too big. So, but it can also make us feel a little special in the missions that we're doing and the grand work that we're doing for the collective. Honestly, a lot of us really did take on big missions. If you're resonating with my messages here, you probably came to be a lineage healer. You came to work on the grids, to be a way shower, oracle, a priestess, something, right? A leader of the new earth in some form, even if it doesn't look like it's a spiritual mission. Many of us here are not meant to be healers or teachers. My charts are just full of spiritual teacher energy. And I've been a healer in many lifetimes. But not all of us who are on this awakening path are meant to anchor that in, right? But to remember that we are not doing this alone. And so that should give us solace. We should also remember that our guides are working through us, higher self, source is working through us. It should give us some comfort and solace to remember we're not carrying this alone. And so it can feel really heavy, but also to remember that if we get into that, like, specialness idea of, oh my God, I can't believe, how profound the work that I'm doing for the collective is. I'm so important. It's subtle. It's really subtle. And then that can, you like when you acknowledge it, it can look like that very subtle, humble brag of, I'm just doing this work for the collective. And sometimes people say that with pure, genuine authenticity. I'm just doing this work for the collective. So it's like, what's the delivery like? You can feel that very slight frequency shift sometimes, right? And, how else does this look? Sometimes it's like not everybody is ready for what I carry, which can be very true. Because as we evolve on our path, we evolve out of people's frequencies many times. So that can look like family members and former friends not really being able to connect with us, but also even people who are on the path. You might be a little bit too high frequency for them at a certain point, and there is real truth to that. But again, it's like, how is that being shared and portrayed? Is that a bypass? If you were actually operating out of integrity and somebody was triggered by your behavior, or actually calling you out on something that was not totally grounded or in alignment, maybe there was a legitimate truth in what they were saying. So that can be used as a bypass and a projection as well. Not everybody is ready for my frequency, that kind of thing. So it's like, okay, that can hide unprocessed elitism, some unprocessed pain, some unprocessed shadow. Um, and then what we're seeing with kind of a more like, influential figure out there right now with another podcast drop yesterday is people don't understand me, so they attack. Haters don't get me. And that again can be true. That can totally be true for people, especially who are not on the path. They can project onto you. They can project onto anybody who's walking a different path. But that can also be a huge bypass from the shadow. So it can be a huge defense mechanism to not take on valid feedback, valid critical feedback. That isn't criticism or judgment, but it's saying, hey, it's time to call each other up. Again, why isn't anybody in your field doing this for you? So it can kind of carry this martyrdom template. So that's that sacrifice template that is also anchored in. So a key reflection for us all is, are you offering your truth from a frequency and space of love, of truth, of authenticity and neutrality as well? Or are you really needing to be seen as the one who knows everything, right? I do not think I know everything. I know that I speak from a space of having being really grounded in my clarity and my truth. My gene keys are truth and illumination, and I do have an open channel, so I have to acknowledge that because I played small for so long and my voice was completely shut down for so many years of my life. So, and I have a Mars in Leo. Mars and Mercury in Leo. So I can come off a little fiery sometimes, but it's that conviction to help us all, because I'm also walking this path of mastery. My soul just so deeply wants all of us to get there. And so it's like this coming from this deep passion. And yes, sometimes I get it wrong. Um, and again, to remember, you are not the first and you are not the only one. And that is a very, very beautiful thing. When you do this profound work, whether it is the grid work, the light work, the field work, you have to remember it's not just you. And we are working to become pure vessels for source. We are working to alchemize our shadows so that we don't have ego distortions in the work that we do, in the messages that we share. So we are collectively arriving at this sacred threshold that thousands have prepared before us. And even on our individual paths, we might cross a particular threshold of our journey. We might level up, if you will. But to remember that the field, the collective field, the groundwork has been laid for decades, centuries, millennia. Thank you, Yeshua and Mary Magdalene, for seeding Christ consciousness on to the planet at a very dense time. And so, just it's I think a good analogy for this is like a relay race is one way to look at it. We're also collectively like weaving the tapestry. It's kind of an overdone analogy now. It's unfortunate because I really like it. We're like, multiple of us are painting the masterpieces. We all have like a paintbrush or two, and we're all working on it together, creating the beautiful murals together, right? But also the baton has been passed down through generations within your own lineage. Your ancestors, your soul families have been assisting you and guiding you, even in this lifetime. You're not doing it alone. And we have to remember to call on that guidance, to call on that assistance, but also to remember that collectively, there are many of us out here having ripple effects out into the collective field, out into the collective consciousness, doing the grid work. This impacts all of us. Me doing work here in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, which I don't know how much longer I'll be here, but me doing this here, it's actually the mirror Stargate to Giza. I'm not taking credit for that other work, but I've actually been to Egypt twice, and on my last pilgrimage, I was guided to do a really specific grid work process, but that wasn't also me, my human. It was my higher self and my source guidance guiding me. And it was like this seeding seeds of crystalline consciousness into the core. I don't know if I can say that here, but a very specific location that, I got special access to through my group, not just me, all of us in the group, but I was guided to do a very specific process. And I don't know how big that role was compared to all the other roles. Like, how much was those planting the seeds, a part of this greater shift? I don't know. But, we're all playing our own little role. And sometimes that role can be big, but we have to remember it's still not us alone doing it. We're not doing this all together. Maybe my little role was to help activate some other person who was meant to bring through something even more important. They were like little keys that were unlocking things for everybody else that came there after, or even just one person that came there after. I don't know. Or it had a ripple effect in the grid. I don't even know. So it's like, we can think the magnitude of the mission is massive, and sometimes we underplay it, but sometimes it doesn't even matter. We don't have to know how big it was because we have to remember we're playing a role. We're each like a little puzzle piece in the greater picture, but to remember that we're not the whole puzzle ourselves. So, yeah, lots of analogies coming through for this. But remember that the field opens to you because you were willing. So in that sense, this is what makes a chosen one. You were willing. You were willing to step up, to step forward, to do the work because this is not easy work. So it's that fine balance of remembering to congratulate ourselves because this is really freaking hard work. But also, it's not because you were first or special or chosen in the sense of you deserve things over other people, in the way that like a lot of people interpret it from that biblical sense. Not that kind of chosen one, okay? This is why, like, the chosen one's narrative, there's a lot of truth in it, but there's a lot of distortion in it as well. So what's basically the theme of this is basically that the ego really loves to claim the victory where it was really divine grace at work. And so this is where we get to remember that we are vessels. We are humble vessels for the divine. And yes, we get to acknowledge the profound work that we are doing, but to also never forget that, it's not the grids aren't clearing because we did a thing. It's because we became vessels for source to work through us. We created that space, basically. Yeah. And yeah, the best term to use for this is co-creation. all healing is co-creative. Healing shouldn't drain you, for example. When I do my sessions, I know that I've gotten to the place where I need to be to hold the space and integrity because I'm not drained after the session. So my energy isn't going into it, and it shouldn't. I should be the vessel for the other person's higher consciousness, for source, for the knowings to come through, to be the mirror reflection, even to just simply hold the container, even. I shouldn't be giving my energy to the person because that's just not how it's meant to work. And that can, our own distortions can then become injected into the field. And this is, I believe, part of the reason, at least, why a lot of healing is distorted, because people don't know how to maintain their energetic barriers and boundaries when they open space for people and hold containers. That's super important, that energetic hygiene. So, your individual insights as a channel, as an oracle, or, as whatever, this is just part of the cosmic web. We're all creating this beautiful web of cosmic remembrance, of sacred remembrance together, this web of consciousness. The grid is being activated, it's coming online. So, what ego can hijack the miracle and say, I created that. This is where a lot of that manifestation stuff gets distorted as well. I want this, and so my desires are going to be catered to by the divine. So it distorts this idea of devotion and being a vessel and being a conduit for these missions that we came here to do, that we incarnated to fulfill. This is more about fulfilling a mission and anchoring a blueprint that is so much bigger than us, so much bigger than our egos. So, especially when it comes to leadership, this is really important to recognize all these subtle distortions and frequency lapses or whatever. So, Aubrey Marcus, don't want to dwell on the guy, but he keeps putting himself out there. He put out another podcast episode yesterday that was clearly not taking responsibility in the appropriate manner. He suggested rather that they used the incorrect terminology. I really didn't stay for the whole thing. I didn't have time for that just now. But what I did catch was that radical monogamy was the incorrect term. It should have been radical fidelity, because they were being faithful to the truth above all, to their personal truth. And he was saying that people were hating and not understanding, they, just only seeing him through the lens of his podcast. And I'm like, well, that's not exactly true either. And if you actually listen to the feedback, the honest feedback that people were giving on that podcast episode, it wasn't about projection. It wasn't about personal choices. It was about something much deeper and more insidious that went unacknowledged so far. I can understand why it would be really hard to take on that much backlash from that kind of an episode when you open it up and are so vulnerable, especially for the women involved. But they all did make that choice to put themselves out there so publicly. So again, it's like the haters don't understand the profound work that we're doing because we're so far ahead of everyone else that they just don't understand us yet. So that's rooted in ego, right? And there's still that performance element underlying his whole podcast and branding and all of that. So it's about, I've done all this radical work and people just aren't ready for it. And, I can't wait until the time when people acknowledge me for the profound work that I've done, kind of energy underlying it. So how can we check ourselves in this process? There's a couple just reflection points that I want to share just to actually provide value here, like solutions focused, right? So am I sharing this to be of service or to be validated? Can I share truth without attachment to how it's being received? Am I willing to keep learning and be wrong? So those are really good checkpoints for all of us. And anchoring into authentic embodied leadership. So we have to remember that true leadership isn't the loudest voice out there. It's often quiet, it's softer when it comes to spiritual stuff, especially. It's clear and it's grounded. And there's an authentic truth that you can feel in the frequency. Sometimes it's not even the words they're saying, it's in the frequency that they're embodying. Um, and, the more work that you do, real work, shadow work, inner alchemy, the more clear you become, the less performance is required. So this is also, you don't need to call yourself any particular label. Your frequency leads, your frequency speaks for you. You will have a certain gravitas when you're actually embodied in your highest truth. You will attract people and you will radiate that frequency out as somebody who, is worth investing in, or giving their time to, investing energy, time, any kind of resource, right? Why should I listen to this person or whatever? Or why should I hire them to do a session or something like that? Why should I invest in their container, their program, yada, yada, yada. So then we have to remember also that sometimes it's the humble brag, but they're still operating in distortion. So it's so subtle, and we all are navigating this path. Our higher self is guiding us, and there are certain mistakes that we make along the way, and we also have to see them not as mistakes, but as lessons. I've had many learning lessons of investing in the wrong people and yada, yada, yada. Also, just myself not totally acting in integrity in the way that I react. I've been working a lot on that because I have been in, like, there are dynamics around me that were very reactive type dynamics. And so, even though I was often just like defending my boundaries, it wasn't taken very well. But then I would react, and I wasn't containing my energy very well either. So, yeah, so really navigating that has been part of my journey. And I'm not pretending I am fully there. We get tested continually, right? So, the invitation for us all is to really just anchor into embodiment and operating in authenticity and integrity to the best of our ability. And if we do fall out of line, or, just fall from grace ever so slightly, even, to just acknowledge that, be honest, but not from a space of disingenuity, of, projection, or of, saying, oh, well, they're wrong. But it's just saying, like, oh, I'll do better next time. Thanks for calling me out on that one. But then also remember your boundaries. Sometimes people are going to call you out and they're not right, actually. They're projecting. So it's a really fine line. And this is what the path of mastery is about. So ego itself isn't evil. I also want to wrap up with this. It's a necessary container, but it does need to be dissolved so that it is in service to the soul, to higher consciousness, so that ego itself is not driving the chariot. Okay? Analogy. I don't know. Maybe the chariot visual is something that somebody needed to hear here. So, another final reflection point is, where might spiritual ego still be playing out in me? It's an ongoing reflection for us all on this journey where we're at now. We're stepping through massive threshold after massive threshold, and we get to keep shedding these layers. So, if this resonates, I so appreciate the like, subscribe, comment. I would love to hear how this has been showing up in your reality. And yeah, if you would like to go deeper, the recording for the Diamond, Sun, Emerald, Grail activation is available for purchase. It is really, really potent, so beautiful. I got really beautiful feedback from it. And that's a really good entry point into experiencing my work. And I will be hosting an upcoming Defense Against the Dark Arts one-off masterclass, and that will be available inside my Luminary monthly membership, where you get level 1. And then my full on mastery temple of remembrance Illumina Wisdom, inside Illumina Wisdom School called Illuminaries, basically real life Hogwarts, will be opening shortly. So stay tuned for that. And if you're interested, you can check out the details below. Pre-registration is technically open. So that is available. It's going to be magical. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. And yes, if you want a one-on-one, I am open and available for the one-on-ones. Crystalline womb healing, as well as one-on-one multi-dimensional field work and soul blueprint activations. So if you have any questions about that, just send me an email. I'll also be sharing I'll also be sharing a quick video on the work that I do, how I work shortly. So stay tuned for that if you're curious to learn a little bit more in depth. And yeah, I'm working on things on my back end, getting that all organized so it's very clear and easy and seamless because so much has upgraded for me as I've been doing this work. I thought I was, at the beginning of this year, kind of like there. And then the last few months have just been like a massive, massive whole other level of upgrade and transformation that I certainly wasn't anticipating. We never do, right? So I've basically been upgrading the back end even more. So yeah, thank you so much for being here on the journey with me. Again, those like, subscribes, comments are so appreciated. It helps it get out there. Share this with anybody you feel might resonate with. And yes, onward and upward in love and light as we journey home to the heart of truth, which is the name of my podcast. This is not part of the podcast, but yeah, I have another episode coming up next Tuesday. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, that's going to be a really juicy deep dive, a solo ep, kind of a reflection on where we're at right now collectively. So yeah. All right. I will see you soon.